The Echoes, Life After Childhood Trauma. This is not just about trauma, but what it leaves behind. This episode explores themes of childhood trauma and emotional memory, so please listen with care and pause if you need to. If any part of this conversation stirs something difficult, support is available and all the numbers are available in the show notes. So if you scroll to the bottom of the podcast, you should see several numbers that you can call for immediate assistance and immediate help and support. Sometimes when I try to remember my childhood, it comes back in fragments. Not like a story with a clear beginning and end, more like bits of film found in an old drawer. Some scenes are so sharp they just make me wince, and others are fogged with light leaks, the film reel flickering just when something important is about to be revealed. There are days when I think I remember everything, every look, every silence, every small humiliation that taught me how not to need too much, how not to be too visible, how to stay really quiet. And there are days when the whole thing just feels completely redacted, as if someone in my brain decided the past needed to be handled by the internal security service and blacked out all the sensitive bits for my own protection. It's really strange how we can lose years, but never quite lose the feeling of them. Even when the details blur, the body keeps its own archive. It never forgets. You can be making a coffee or tea, having a conversation, even laughing, when some part of your body suddenly just jumps in and reminds you you've been here before. Not this exact scene, not these people, but this feeling, the tightening, the quiet retreat, the hiding, the subtle pull away from what might hurt. It's as if our bodies never stop taking notes. Every shock, every disappointment, every moment when love felt conditional, all neatly filed under survival strategies and all still active. And that's really what I want to talk about in this space. Not just the trauma itself, but what it leaves behind, because what it leaves behind is often invisible. It doesn't scream or announce itself. It just lives quietly in the way we think, the way we relate, the way we breathe. I'm Jimi Katsis, and I've been a psychotherapist for more than 30 years, walking alongside people living with what I call the echoes of childhood trauma. This podcast, this whole project, is about pursuing a kind of truth. The truth of who we were before events distorted the lens, the one we look through to see the world, and the one the world looks through when it sees us. A time before our bodies stored memories that changed the way we move and love and react, before adaptations started wearing our names. And when I say echoes, I mean the way old survival patterns show up in new contexts. Sitting in a meeting or lying next to someone kind, and out of nowhere we flinch, not always physically, but somewhere deep inside of us. The body whispers, "Careful, remember what happened last time." It's trying to help, of course. It's saying, "I know how this story ends. We need to stay safe." But the story we're living now isn't the one we survived then, and that's the dissonance. The body doesn't know we've grown. So even when life looks different on the surface, better job, a kinder partner, warmer home, the internal security system still operates as if danger is always just 2 seconds away. Our nervous systems are archivists. They never forget. And when something feels familiar, even if it's safe, the body doesn't check the timestamp, it just reacts. Maybe you know that moment when someone's tone changes slightly and your chest tightens before your mind catches up, or when a silence lasts half a second too long and your brain starts building an escape plan. That's the body doing its job, still trying to protect the child who once had no protection at all. And it's strange how our past can still dictate the choreography of our present. The way we turn away first, the way we apologize for existing, the way we feel responsible for everyone's emotional temperature. None of this means we're broken. It just means we survived. And survival leaves residue. Sometimes I think of these responses as old software still running in the background. They were written on a crisis, coded for emergencies, and they're brilliant at what they do because they kept us alive, they kept us safe. They just never got the memo that the emergency ended. And I see this pattern in therapy all the time, not as pathology, but as logic. This beautiful, painful logic of a system that adapted perfectly to an impossible environment. And I know it in myself too. Even after all these years and everything I've learned, there are still moments when my own nervous system leaps in like an over-enthusiastic security guard. I could be in mid-conversation, perfectly safe, and my body suddenly decides it's time to brace. Sometimes I don't even notice it until the next day, when I feel that familiar ache in my shoulders and think, you had an old visitor yesterday. It's humbling, isn't it, how long it takes to convince your body that the world has changed. How often we still live as though it hasn't. And this is what the Echoes is about. Not advice, not steps, not systems, but recognition and awareness. Because when we begin to recognize the echoes, they start to lose their authority. Over the coming episodes, we're going to explore what trauma leaves behind in every corner of our lives. We're going to talk about the internal weather system, the low pressure front of depression, anxiety or numbness that can turn an ordinary Tuesday into a life-threatening event. We're going to look at relationships, the stage where trauma loves to perform, why we find comfort in the familiar even when the familiar hurts, why intimacy can feel more dangerous than danger itself, and why sometimes we sabotage what we most long for the moment it gets too close. We're going to talk about the body, not metaphorically, but literally, the body that keeps a running score and the one that keeps trying to settle the debt. The way that joy can feel like a trap, how needing anything can feel like weakness, and how hard it can be to believe that safety won't evaporate once you relax. And eventually, we're going to talk about what happens when we become the adults in other people's lives, as parents, partners, carers, and how to avoid passing on the psychological heirlooms no one wanted in the first place. There's not going to be 5 steps to emotional freedom. And there's no hack, no manifesting, no pretending that mindset alone can rewrite the body's memory. Recovery, if we can even use that word, isn't a straight line. It's more like a long conversation between the parts of us that kept us alive and the parts trying to finally live. I've spent decades helping people uncover their own psychological archaeology, the stories buried beneath the stories they share. But I don't come to this as an expert looking down from safety. I come as someone who spent most of his life trying to make peace with the noise of my own echoes. I know how peculiar it feels to freeze during warmth and to pull away from love, to mistrust quiet. I know how exhausting it is to spend years trying to get over it when it isn't a thought to get over but apparent and a pattern to unlearn. So this isn't trauma explained by someone who's never had any. It's a conversation between people who've realized that being functional doesn't mean being free. That the performance of normality is its own kind of exhaustion. And maybe between us, we can start telling the truth about what trauma became after the event ended. Because that's the part we rarely talk about. What happens after? How the old distortions keep dressing up as personality, as preference, as independence even. How the world praises us for being strong when we are still fully on guard. And if we were shaped by what was done to us, that shaping isn't permanent. The body can be taught new shapes, gentler ones. And it begins really by naming what we feel instead of what we think we're supposed to feel. So let's not talk about healing as erasing. Let's talk about remembering safely, about bringing the echoes into daylight and learning to hear them as messages, not mandates. Over time, that's what starts to happen. We stop living as echoes and start listening to them instead. And slowly, the volume changes. So before we close, I want to leave you with a small reflection, something to sit with, not to solve. What's the one thing you wish someone had understood about you when you were younger? Just notice what that rises. Don't try to edit it or make it reasonable. Whatever comes up, that's a voice worth listening to, because the child who still lives inside us isn't asking for analysis. They're asking for witness. And that's what this podcast is, a space for witness. If this conversation stirred something difficult, please reach out for support. All the lines are listed below in the show notes. You are not alone. It might feel like it. It might feel like you are a singular person in this massive world of complete strangers, but you are not alone. There is help, and there is hope, and there is space here for all of us.